Howdy y'all, I am Ice Cold, and I'm finally back from vacation, but there is one important thing that I need to talk about before I get into all of the new spring test round content, and that is, of course, my arguments for the whole Frost Giant debacle that's been going on. I have gone ahead and prepared my arguments for all of the arguments that I've seen in regards to Frost Giant. There have definitely been many. I've seen my share of strong and weak arguments surrounding this spell since the Ice community was let down last Friday. I'll also be addressing some developer concerns. There have been some there as well, and ultimately it's all up to them as to whether or not they want to do the right thing in this situation. To reiterate, my position, and the most popular position as shown in many polls run by various community members, is to rework the spell by removing the stun and increasing the damage accordingly. The new giant would do something in the 640 to 650 range and go up to 705, 710, 715 at tier 5 with how spell elements have historically worked. So let's begin. Among the weakest of the arguments was that reworking Frost Giant to get rid of the stun wasn't a good idea because Ice is a low damage school, so it shouldn't do more damage. I want any and everyone making this argument to look at the life school. Forest Lord's median damage of 650 is more than satisfactory, and they are able to get this damage because the spell does not lose, 200 points of damage because of a pointless stun. I should make this abundantly clear throughout the video so I don't give off the wrong impression. Spells like Forest Lord should not be nerfed, alright, since they are the main PvE spells that people use for most of their journey in PvE, of course. Alpha Striking, as it's called, is the main way to do damage. That's set in stone, that's not changing. May as well let every class have something useful for that. This whole, low damage school thing that doesn't apply to any of the other quote-unquote low damage schools should not then also apply to Ice in such a way. We just sort of want to be on even ground with everybody else, but, without nerfing them, because, why would you do that? A take that got a surprising amount of traction, likely due to the populist way it was worded, was this comment about school identity and how Ices should quit whining about having low damage because that's part of our school identity, guys, yeah! This and the low damage school arguments go hand in hand, and while this one seems more eloquent and higher IQ, they're actually the exact same. Sure, there's been a considerable loss in terms of school identity across all the other schools, but in these 7 pip spells cases, that has served to the benefit of the overall play and experience. Not to mention, as you go along, school identity matters, less and less. Arguably after Crocotopia or Marleybone, you see diminishing returns on that. My budget walkthrough series where I literally play an Ice, makes that apparent enough, you know what I'm saying? And by the end of the first arc, every school is just trying to clear enemies as quickly as possible. Identity stops mattering in Dragonspire. Everyone has the same goal throughout the game, taking the shortest path to defeat the boss. No one needs a tank, or a healer, or a debuff spammer, to give a few examples for 99.9% of the game. Is this an inherent design flaw? Sure. It would be nice if identity mattered, but the truth is, and fellas like this won't like to hear it, identity does not matter at all. Rather than clinging to this fever dream of every school being, super unique, it's better to accept the reality that there's not much that's different between the 7 schools. Frost Giant should follow this. Maybe someday there will be a rebalance of all the spells and whatnot, if the devs, ever figure out how to reinstate school identity, but that day is not coming for a while, if ever. And there's no point in making Ice suffer until then. Arguably the weakest of the arguments was the, it got buffed, so stop yammering about Frost Giant not getting a buff. It got buffed. I saw a particularly close-minded individual say that a net gain of 45 damage from the spell's, current state, which, just so we're clear, looks like this. I mean, this is biddable. This is why I'm rallying for the change, but I've been over that just in every every month I've talked about it. So but they said it was a buff, and to which I replied, yes, it is a buff, but it is still just an absolutely pitiful spell that was already hundreds behind everyone else but now at tier 5 it'll be even further behind the other tier 5s. All we want as ices is for the spell to lose the main thing holding down its damage so that it can be reworked into a spell that does real damage, so that we're not a laughing stock all throughout the last 3 arcs. This one's particularly weak because saying the spell was buffed is like saying water is wet. Like, yes, of course it was buffed, but not to where it needs to be. One of the stronger ones that I saw was the argument that stuns should actually be better, and while I'm honestly not too sure that I agree, I think stuns should actually be removed entirely, but that's for another video. It would make the existing spell better. Thing is, I can't name a single person that would rather stun a boss than defeat it. This is the crux of my argument. Whether the stun is useful or not doesn't matter. What matters is that ice wizards are able to defeat bosses at the same speed as life wizards, and right now, that is far from being the case. Even mobs are like this, you know, in Wallaru especially, and I found that it was more worth it to frenzy into Crocula into Blizzard as opposed to frenzy Giant, because I'd then have to spend a turn passing, which would end up being a 4-round fight. I opted to take only 1 extra turn in mob fights that no other school has to take, as opposed to the 2 that it would have been had I focused on using Frenzy into Giant and to pass into Blizzard. When I later quested through the world on my life, all the fights were really as simple as Frenzy into Forest Lord, with the occasional Blade or Empower into Zand thrown in if it was a life mob or something like that. So, as nice as it would be for the stun to actually do something against stun immune bosses, it's almost never useful, because even when I do stun mobs and bosses when I play faster, I'd be out of pips anyway. And if I don't get a shad, I'm just passing the turn they're stunned, which defeats the purpose. I imagine it would be the same for bosses too. So, to sum it up, stuns are useless, and stuns will never be useful. So that is the main reason why I am asking for it to be removed in favor of 2 pips worth of damage. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the 2 main arguments that I've seen some of the devs make. These are stronger arguments, as the concerns they have are genuine and real. So this segment is meant to dispel those concerns so they will feel a little more encouraged to rework the spell. A while back, I don't believe I was around for it, but they proposed a rework to Deer Knight in Test Realm that reduced the damage to slightly more than what it was doing up front, and axing the overtime in favor of a minus 20% AoE weakness. There was, understandably, mass backlash over this. They were effectively removing damage from Deer Knight in favor of utility when no one asked for it, which, as I've been over for months at this point, is the exact problem that 95% of ices have with Frost Giant. Backlash here was, totally understandable. They were effectively applying the Frost Giant problem to Deer Knight for no discernible reason, and they got told for it. It would have actually done more damage up front with an enchant because the overtime would be gone, so I think the comm would have gotten over it eventually, but the principle of it was still a slap in the face to death wizards everywhere. The devs have cited this incident as a major reason why they haven't changed Giant, which to me seems a bit odd, since Deer Knight was going to get nerfed with their proposed change back then, whereas everyone railing for a Giant rework is looking to get the spell quote-unquote buffed. The change I am lobbying for will not receive any sort of mass controversy that the devs experience with Deer Knight. That whole quote-unquote people will cry if we remove the stun thing will not happen. Literally nobody will mourn the loss of the main thing holding our main spell back. You might see some, school identity from non-ice mains here and there, but I've been over that. I do get the concern with changing legacy spells. I understand that it has a lot to do with that Deer Knight thing from a while back, but in PvE's current state, it makes no sense for ice to bear this burden when no one else has to. Not wanting blowback is a valid reason to not make a change, that much is fully understandable. But a lot of the discussion you see around the spell, both from the 85% that want the stun gone and the 15% that want it to stay, and I'm being very generous with that number, wouldn't shed a tear over it getting removed for more damage. It would be, in all honesty, a buff, and a badly needed one at that. I understand that the devs, they don't like touching legacy spells because of stuff like the Deer Knight incident, but this is a case where there's an overwhelming amount of support for the cause, and it's mathematically balanced around their set DPP values with, their pip acceleration and all that. We have done the work in balancing the spells for them, and all that is left is for them to actually implement the change that a minimum of 85% of the community really wants. If they're still unsure after all that I've said, they should ask the official Discord community of nearly 12,000 members, tagging the ice school role for it preferably. It'd, I guess, decrease some turnout, but we are the ones affected after all, to cast their votes on a poll. Option A would be to remove the stun on Path A in favor of adding 180 damage to the base version, leading up to 715 base damage at the 5th tier. And option B would be to leave the spell as it is. And I can assure you here, option A would win this poll by at least 70 percentage points, like a difference of 70%. And as I've said before, this is a common sense change, and I can assure that the devs will not spark mass hysteria like they did with Dear Knight. One big thing I did want to mention is that some have called for the proposed change to coexist with the stun version on a different spellment path, creating a Path C. Apparently, the devs are averse to adding these Path Cs because they, quote-unquote, plan to use them down the line. I understand that new tech can be hard to create and that the current model only supports 3 paths, so it's understandable that the devs might not want to spring for this. Ratbeard actually has expressed interest for the players to, be able to acquire every available path at some point and just be able to use the different spells as they see fit. Definitely wouldn't happen in this update, but the idea is there, and it's honestly a really great idea at that. That in mind, new spellment paths beyond Path B would be nice to have for whenever that drops. And when it does, that would undoubtedly require new tech. So, which will come first? A new path dedicated to whatever the devs see fit? Or, like possibly for a new side activity that only a select few would do? Or a way to get every version of a spellment path into your spell deck, which is a very popular idea. You probably see where I'm going with this. New tech is gonna get involved with spellments sooner or later, and Court, one of the wiki masters, gave an idea that I thought would really be great. He said that there should be 2 different folders, that type of thing, where one is dedicated to advanced content paths like the proposed Path Bs that we're seeing, and one dedicated to standard content like the Path As. And while I'm sure that would take time to develop, it would open the door for the devs to do so much more with both standard and advanced, which I'm sure they want to do. You could even work Ratbeard's idea about having multiple different spellment paths into it by having players choose one for standard and one for advanced. And, I'm sure that was his original intention, and I personally would really love to see it come to fruition. Where I'm headed with this is that if the devs are still concerned about blowback, they should have Path A be the stun path, B for the 715 damage path without the stun, and C for the Giga Blade counter thing. This is the way to satisfy everyone. It would be honestly pretty whack to not aim for that, especially in a debate like this. And because new tech is going to be required for spellments eventually, it's not as strong of an argument to say that they're just, not going to do it because they might use another path for something else down the line, like soon TM, right? Might as well add the 3rd path now to satisfy everyone on both sides of the stun debate, and, like just to throw this in at the end, as an avid raider, I have done the Crimes Guide raid enough to know that pure damage 7-pip spells actually exist in the files. There have been many times where my team has been hit by a 975 damage Stormlord or a 715 damage Frost Giant, so the spells exist. They just need to be accessible to players. There's also a thread made by a viewer of mine here in the Discord arguing for this change, but a bunch of ice phobes found their way in and started doing their thing, so the thread got locked. Reading through some of this, it's like people are saying, it's like there's a guy, this fella, I've talked with this fella before, and he has said Frost Giant should be nerfed to 375 with the stun because PvE itself is too fast paced, which yeah, he also doesn't have a max ice, which is kind of funny, to think about in this context. But it's like I kind of can't fault him, he's got noble intentions in saying it. He wants identity to return to the game, but I had a whole segment on that in this video. It's like as great as it would be for Identity to really come back, it's just not. So it's like, takes like that don't really help. I'll keep it a stack. So Court actually makes a good point here. He says, so guys, you know, let's look at what the devs would ask. Why does the stun need to be removed? What's stopping them from replacing it with something like a weakness instead? And truthfully, you know, there is nothing stopping them from adding some other goofy utility. And personally, I hope that's not the path that they decide to take if they decide to axe the stun. I have made arguments for why the stun is useless utility, you know, because it never gets used, it never comes into play. And the thing with utility on these, you know, PvE spells that people use to clear bosses and whatnot is that the utility, it's like any utility does just not get used. And so it's like adding a weakness, like Court says, it wouldn't improve things at all. It's still the same deal with useless utility because, you know, if a mob or a boss is dead, it can't get weaknessed. So that's sort of the crux of my argument. It's like the utility on like Ice's main hit in PvE is it's just useless. Any utility on a main on a school's flagship PvE spell, just like bogging down the damage like the stun is for Ice, it just, like, I'm never gonna support that, because if the utility never gets used, what is the point in having it in the first place? The path Bs, I think, have been really well executed because they go all in on the utility, and I think, you know, rock on, right? And it's like that's really great, because if you're using the path Bs that are just loaded with utility, you're not using them to kill, you're using them to use their utility. And it's like this is sort of why I was talking about like that path C type thing. It's like to appease everybody, you know, keep the path with the stun just for fellas like Chris, but also, you know, have the path like in the middle that just does the pure damage. Because when I'm using Frost Giant, you know, I'm not using it to stun people, I'm using it to like defeat mobs and bosses. It's my hope that the devs sort of understand that and sort of see my point that utility on spells like these, especially the path A's, it's just not great, because it's like path B, they have set aside for all of these different spells to be the utility path, but for path A, that's the damage path. So it's like they've seen, you know, it's like giving people pure damage that should be an option. It's like that's kind of the beauty of spell elements, that you can customize your spells how you want to customize them. So having, you know, a path for the people who like want utility on their main BDE spell, for example, you know, that would be good, because it would let those people, you know, still have their path. But for the people that don't want it, which is honestly a vast majority of the com, it's much better to just leave path A as something that just does pure damage. And then for the people that really want to go for utility, they have that option too with the new spellment path, like the current path B. I think that the more customizability there is, the better, but having that pure damage path would honestly fix the issue. So that is what I am hoping happens. And I mean, Roxy responds to it by saying, you know, in a typical PvE setting, damage is what kills the boss. Stun takes away from the damage, it does nothing. Even on the rare occasion it does stun the boss, it just prolongs the fight, and it would be better if it generated enough damage to kill with a reasonable amount of buffs. And to add to this, I would say it's like if you're using it with just 7 pips, like you usually do if you're frenzying into it, you'll be out of pips anyway. So it's like, even if they're stunned, then you won't have the pips to make the most of that stun. So it's like, that's another reason why it should go. But of course, you know, to that argument, I'm sure people would say like, hey, you know, it's like, oh, you know, that's when we can give a better utility, like a hit and trap, or a hit and shield, as some people have mentioned. But it's like I was saying before, a hit and shield, nice as it would be, it just wouldn't do the job. It would be applying a shield when the fight's already over, and that's sort of just what I wanted to add to this, but I've been over it, as you've heard. Court also mentions in reply to this Jack fella saying, like, if you like comparing Frost Giant to other spells, I mean, I've done my fair share of comparing it to Forest Lord, but I do that just to show what the damage value would be just if it was a pure damage spell. It's basically just there for me to do the math. You know, it's like, but he does mention, you know, it's like the devs would say to this, it's like if you're comparing Frost Giant to Forest Lord, the devs might say yes, but you have a util and they don't. So it's like I've said a million times, it's about the utility being meaningless, and I hope I've driven that point home plenty. I want to just like not talk about that anymore because I've talked it to death, and I hope the devs understand it by this point. But you know, if they don't, or if they want to do it anyway, they should. I would be open to just talking to them, like one-on-one, or one bid me on the whole design team, because it would be really, really great if I could just have a direct dialogue with them rather than just making these videos every month, you know what I'm saying? Court then says to Nasine, you have some really based favorite artists, I'll say that much. You are definitely an Ophelia fan, though, I could tell. Anyway, Court says here, you know, we're getting somewhere. Perfect. In reply to Nasine saying the stun is meaningless 99% of the time and all that, but then he says, now what if the dev says let's make bosses stunnable? And that's, I went into this, I said it was one of the stronger arguments because, you know, it's like if we do make the bosses stunnable or make stuns better just in general, you still have a problem because you're losing damage to useless utility. It's like making stuns better, like I was saying before, is not going to change stuff. It's like putting utility on a spell that is primarily used to defeat bosses is just going to lower the damage, and nobody wants that. It's like the utility's usefulness in any case is always at the heart of the problem, because damage loss to something that physically just doesn't happen or doesn't have an effect because the fight's over, you know what I'm saying? It's like, then it's pointless to have that utility on the card if it never gets used. And then Court has honestly a really good take here. If you can't structure your argument to predict every single thing the devs will say, you're gonna get nowhere. Sorry, just how this dev team works. It's really true, and I feel like I am prepared for everything that the devs will say, which is why I would love to actually speak with them about Frost Giant. Just a dialogue between me and them, so that way something could actually get done. Court then goes on to say, in reply to Jack again, where Jack said, you know, like, let's do the same thing the other way around. You have a proper argument as for why Frost Giant should have a stun and therefore less damage. I should mention Court is not arguing on behalf of either side. He's really just trying to direct the discussion better, but Court's response to it is, yeah, some players use it, in quotes, is what the devs use against you guys. And, you know, this is why I mentioned adding a Path C. It's like, Path C will shut down that argument. Because you would then have the people who, you know, have the stun path and the people that have the pure damage path, and that would solve the problem entirely. It's just really on them to add this third path. So that seems to be the main challenge. Yeah, I mean, we'll just have to see what they decide to do with that. Best case scenario, they just add the Path C, and, you know, all is well in the world. Everybody, 100% of the community is satisfied with it, but it's like they just need that push to do it, and I hope this can be that. And again, with the whole Path C thing, with Court says here, what's hard in this case is you can't tell how many players are using Frost Giant for the stun and how many are using Frost Giant just a one-shot. It's like, there is, I'll be honest, there's a lot more Ice Wizards that are using it to one-shot, but there are people who use it for the stun. It's certainly not me, but, you know, I'm sure are people out there that do use it for the stun. and it's just Path C again. That's all they've got to do to achieve the best possible outcome here. Wolfer here, dude, there's a whole segment. Yeah, I mean, I'm still looking through them, and I'm seeing, you know, I believe a Path C is probably the most reasonable choice. Back up here somewhere, Court mentioned, yeah, they're saving Path C. There's a different functionality that they want to do with it, but it's like I was saying earlier. It's like, when is that realistically gonna come? It's like, if that happens, I don't want to say cross that bridge when you come to it, but I feel like by that time there'll be plenty of time for there to be new tech, and I think that a good short-term solution at least would be to just do the Path C. If it has to be 2, then, you know, I'm gonna keep arguing on behalf of on the behalf of the pure damage, but Path C would fix the issue for now. I don't know if they have any ideas for what they want to do with, like, a Path D, for example. They've got time to think of what they want to do and how they want to implement it. So, you know, they could end the debate right now if if they just decide to go for it. But it's up to them. A bunch of good points from Roxy here. Yeah. What I've seen, Iceman's one is pretty consistent. Remove the stun ahead of the spell to around 650. Probably best to stick with that. As for an argument one that would make it through to the devs. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of this thread has been kind of toxic. It would really be great if those supporting the cause could, like, try and, you know, keep it a little calm. We want them to listen to us after all. It's like, devs probably see outrage, like Roxy's saying here, and that's why we get it. This is yeah, wow, that is this is how about that? how about this one, fellas? Now, I'll say this Jason fella might be a little misguided. It seems as though he really wants this whole identity type thing, and that's what he's pushing for. But it's like I've covered. There is no identity right now. So nice as it would be to have that, clinging to it just isn't gonna get us anywhere. It's like you see something like this, and you wonder if they still play the game. You know what I mean? It's like, no shade or anything, but come on. Okay, yeah, I'm even less convinced now. Okay, yeah, he's spamming these hashtags. That. Okay, man. Okay, I think I might have seen enough. I think I've seen enough. Ooh. Oh wait, no, I haven't. This is the guy. Oh my, bro. Oh my. Oh, he's a death main. Talking all the. Oh my. Bro, how is this fella not bad? Damn, and this guy is what got the thread locked. How fun. Damn, Rock Leaf, go off. Okay, well, yeah. This is where the chat got chalked. Wow, this was something. This was something. Damn, that was a crazy read. That was 800 messages. Yeah, I was on vacation, so I didn't participate in this thread. But wow, there's a lot of ice phobes. A lot of ice phobes. Anyway, that that is where I'm going to end off. Thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more. And I will see y'all later.